to Andrea's Corner, where basically I will be talking to you about Brexit and what Brexit is and how what ended up happening is a really great public relations strategies ended up having to do all of this.
But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Everyone's worried about immigration.
Let's take our country back again.
People could get houses, now you cannot get a house.
They're making palaces compared to what we're living in.
There's a lot of people ride the system.
We want our country back.
Knocked unconscious and left for dead on this very spot by a group of 6 teenagers. An incident local police are treating as a hate crime. One of more than 30 against polls since Britain voted to leave the European Union.
So what ended up happening was Brexit ended up causing Prime Minister David Cameron to resign. A lot of immigrants ended up feeling as if they didn't belong in their own country. And not only that, but the United Kingdom is going to have to actually withdraw from the European Union, which is this giant thing that kind of binds together all of a lot of different European countries within the currency, within trading, within laws and regulations and just civil conduct and all of these things that are transcribed into just British law suddenly have to disappear. So what is Brexit? Brexit is the term for the British exit of the European Union. So why does this matter? Well, because it's going to have to undo 43 years worth of laws and treaties and rules that binds a lot of British citizens and EU citizens. Not only that, but it's going to eventually affect us Americans as well because of how easy it is to trade with other EU countries. So when did this happen? This happened the referendum vote was on Thursday, June 23rd, 2016. That is when 71.6% of the actual voter population turned out in order to cast their vote that would eventually affect all of their lives. The Leave vote casted 51.9%, whereas the Remain vote only was 48.1%. In fact, I have the actual statistic here. England voted to leave by 53.4%, Northern Ireland voted to remain by 55.8%, Scotland voted to remain by 62%, and Wales voted to leave by 52.5%. All of these are really small margins. Actually, the only one that is actually more sure of it would actually be Scotland, and they voted to remain, and they're not remaining. What really captivated voters to vote to leave the EU without a clear solution as to what would happen afterwards? What helped the Leave campaign win the referendum vote was because of the fact that they kept a very clear and simple message. And what I want to argue is that it wasn't necessarily the media bias, it wasn't necessarily populism, it wasn't necessarily the rise of nationalism. Rather, it was just a really great public relations campaign that ended up causing the Leave vote to actually win the referendum vote. The Conservative government, May and Cameron's party, has already introduced the European Union withdrawal bill. If it is passed, it will end all of EU regulation in the UK in one go, which is a lot of different laws and bills, actually. Although the bill is hoping to amend and repeal and improve EU laws, some of these laws include 12,000 EU regulations, 7,900 ways of implementing the EU legislation, an entire European Court justice rulings, a 1958 body of European law, and a lot of different EU treaties. So they have to go through all of those bills and decide to scrap them, which is going to be a very, very long process that no one really knows how to do. I think what's really interesting to analyze in this referendum vote is that a lot of it was based around taking your country back, but more than anything, it was really more of a lashback against a lot of the bureaucrats that had already dominated a majority of British Parliament. Boris Johnson actually used the phrase to take back control every single time he was at the podium. That way, every single person can have that ingrained into their head when they were referring to why the Leave campaign was better. The Remain campaign, on the other hand, they lacked a single compelling message that could translate across all social classes. They focused more on intellectual and economic arguments, which really doesn't appeal to the working class, and it doesn't appeal to the elderly, and it doesn't necessarily appeal to every single social class available. It's easy to just react to what the other side has to say, but that doesn't necessarily win your argument. The message was actually so simple that it was very easy to use on social media. Over the last 6 months, posts on the Remain pages resulted in more than 3.3 million interactions, averaging roughly 475,000 a month. The Leave page, on the other hand, resulted in more than 11 million, which is 3 times more than that of the Remain campaign. Yeah, it's easier to just tweet like, take our country back, than it is saying, well, the economic argument is that the EU does lower trade and tariffs and this and that. While yes, you may be right, it does feel a lot more strong and compelling when you just hear, take our country back. The KISS method that the Leave campaign used actually really benefited the tabloid papers that were in the UK, such as The Sun, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express. I mean, there had already been decades worth of bad press surrounding the EU that it almost made sense for the tabloids to want the UK to leave the EU. Newspapers made sure that there was a lack of clear interest in educating the public about the EU, the UK's relationship with the EU, how the EU works, hence why positive narratives just got really lost in all of the noise that the UK was talking about. I mean, any sort of positive narrative about the EU just got lost because of the fact that the rise of nationalism, because of the rise of populism, why the EU wasn't really benefiting the UK. I mean, it's really hard to be positive when there's just a lot of noise. According to the Center for Research in Communication and Culture, there was a greater volume of articles supporting out over in, and when taking sales to account, the out sale had a bigger advantage. And not only that, but a prime research and consulting company also found that out of the 1,558 articles researched, 41% of newspapers favored leaving the EU, whereas only 27% favored the EU and 23% mixed. So a lot of newspapers were already against the EU. I mean, this had been coming a long time. So the real surprise that happened the day after the referendum vote was held, I don't understand where the surprise was from. This has been happening in the media for such a long time. The media had already set up the EU to be almost a disastrous plan for the UK. So the immigration policies and the immigration rhetoric and the populist rhetoric that was used was just almost kind of a leading along the way to the vote that was eventually going to happen. 14 months prior to the vote, none of the immigration issues or problems with the EU had even come up as something that affected voters. And it wasn't even until tabloids started reporting on immigration issues with the EU that it actually started mattering. The number of Remain to Leave items finds that 41% were pro-Remain and 59% were pro-Leave. And then when you actually took in, for example, all the circulations and which ones are most higher circulating, tends to be more tabloid-wise, it was only 18% pro-Remain and 82% pro-Leave. So everybody was reading everything about pro-Leave rather than being informed about the benefits of the EU. Once again, proving my point. I mean, let's look at the percentage of items presenting a balanced and neutral view from May 6th to June 8th. The Daily Express only had 21.3%. The Daily Mail had 34%. The Sun had 43.9%, and they're the largest tabloid sellers. The more unbiased ones, such as the Financial Times, the Times, I should say, and the Guardian was the one with the most amount of percentage of items presenting a balanced or neutral view, and that was only with 53.5%. How are voters actually supposed to vote for something that will affect their future, and not only that, but doesn't even present itself as a clear solution? How are they supposed to vote for these things and determine what is good for their society if they're not even properly informed? I don't know. I think that all of this, 30 million had decided the fates of what would be the future. And a lot of them didn't have any real clear solution, and it was all emotions based and wasn't necessarily factual. Now, in the grand scheme of things, why does this matter? Well, the keep it simple stupid message that was employed throughout the Leave campaign can easily be employed throughout any other campaign in the future. There was already a lack of information that was used in the Leave and Remain campaigns. So, in a democracy, how are we supposed to go based off of facts when it was entirely emotional this past referendum campaign? What will that say about the post-factual society that UK will be living in after they leave the EU?